Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to our Sunday night show, Dead Air Live on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. It is Sunday night, the 19th of February. God, this time is going by fast. Especially goes by fast when you take 2 weeks straight off in a row. But we are back simulcasting on KGRADB.com, KGRA on Facebook and on YouTube. And thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We've got a fully packed show of things to be talking about in and around the category of the paranormal. And, we've got most of our guests going to be joining us, Ken, at the bottom of the hour
right.
in regards to, selling the paranormal. But I don't know what we're going to talk about for the first half hour. I mean, has anything happened in the world in the last 2 hours, in the last 2 weeks that we've been off?
Have we shot anything down lately?
I don't know. Don't balloon this out of context. It's just not worth it. It really
I have
isn't.
to. I got to turn off my cap lock. Everybody in chat thinks I'm yelling at them. Okay. Hi, Michael. Hello, Mary Beth. Hi, Bonnie. So yeah, we have an interesting show tonight. This is one of those things that when George and I talk on the phone, we have better shows sometimes than we present to you people, but we talk about different aspects of the paranormal. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the commercial aspect, which is why we titled the show Selling the Paranormal. Hi, Ace. Ace was with us. Amazing time at the farm. I did too. We had an absolute blast Friday night at the Conjuring House.
Wait a minute. You were at the Conjuring House again?
The Casa de Conjure. Yeah.
I've never been to the Conjuring House.
You know who else was at the Conjuring House?
Who?
Tim Weisberg.
Tim Weisberg? Let me live vicariously through you, Tim, because I've never been to the Conjuring House. I've never had a chance. Was it entertaining? Oh, we lost Tim.
Yeah, apparently it wasn't that good. Hey, it's Brady. It was Brady's birthday Friday night.
Oh, happy birthday, belated. So anyway, yeah. So tell me a little bit about it. You guys have a good time? Were there demons? Were people tossed across the room? Were there full body apparitions running through the hallways?
No, and possibly.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
No.
I'll take it.
No, and possibly. We were joined, of course, by my partner in crime, Julie DeMay from Rise Up, Cody and Satori. Stopped by for a little bit, for a couple of hours, and everyone ate my homemade lasagna, and they loved it. I have not had any. There's Julie. Hi, Julie. Yeah, it was a great night. I haven't got any complaints at this point. Jason Webster, he was with us all you guys. No complaints. Nobody was rushed to the hospital or anything like that, so I guess I dodged that bullet. No, it was good.
That's awesome. It's it's really, really amazing that you guys can go there as often as you want with as many people that you pick along to come with. It's just, I really, really am so happy for you.
I know. I can just tell, the joy you're expressing. I can see it in your voice, but you're a giver. You know what I mean?
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, the reminder bell for upcoming content and the thumbs up to just do it. And I'm going to say that because I scroll through YouTube all the time, whether I'm looking for cooking things or YouTube University to try to, get myself educated on projects around the house. And I try to always hit that thumbs up. And as we're doing the show, I sneak over to YouTube from our streaming service here, StreamYard, and to see how many thumbs. And I see 3 or 4. And it really is just moving your mouse down, moving that tiny little the arrow, and boom, hit that thumbs up, and what an amazing thing it does for us.
And also, you have the opportunity to donate to Dead Air. We don't like to go out there and say, hey, folks, send us money or anything like that.
Same coffee cup for 3 years.
Yeah, it
I
costs
can't
us
afford a
to,
new one.
it cost us to, for the platform and everything like that. So we won't belabor that because we're not those kind of guys, but it helps. So thank you in advance. George, just hop on a plane, damn it.
Yeah, I'll try to do that too.
Hey, you know
Uh,
what? Tim will be popping back in with us, but we have about 25 minutes before we bring on our guests. And I talked a little bit about what we're going to do.
yeah,
We're going to talk about the business aspect of the paranormal tonight. And I know a lot of people are going to weigh on this because they have some very strong opinions on it, which is one of the reasons that George and I wanted to do this particular show tonight. And we'll give you the background of how we got from there to here as we bring the guests on.
right.
But
Exactly.
first, we'd like to talk a little bit about UFOs.
Yes, and our sponsor, Tic Tacs. Oh no, that's not one of our sponsors. Sorry, we'll take that back.
No,
Forget I ever said that, audience. Don't go out and buy Tic Tacs.
no, go ahead and buy Tic Tacs. Freshen the breath. Okay, so to get this ball rolling here, we all know that we're shooting things down now. They are not aliens. Hi, Chris. How we doing? Is Chris a good friend of ours? There's Ron. There's Kathy. Welcome
Yeah.
tonight. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So all of a sudden we get trigger happy, and we are, and I understand the first one. I understand I don't understand what I'm hearing that these surveillance balloons have been coming for years,
Mhm.
and no one's mentioned it, and nothing's been done of it. And then finally, I guess it became, with the technology most people hold in their hands now with their cell phones, uh, more apparent than ever before. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we got to scramble and shoot this thing down with a $500,000 missile.
Right.
And they, retrieved all the equipment. Of course, they're going to classify everything and not tell anybody what they were attempting to get, even though there are satellites above us right now.
Right.
But I find it interesting that the preceding day or succeeding days from there, that we were shooting down everything.
Mhm.
These balloons, and they were all balloons, so that you guys know, spoiler alert, they're all balloons. Weather
Right.
balloons, independent balloons, people who put up balloons on their own, who spent $14 for the balloon and $500 for the helium, and put these things up in the air, and the military shoots them down.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. These things have been flying around a long time. One of the things we did with the Chinese balloon, we'll call it Chinese balloon because that's what it was, is it didn't pose a threat. However, there were reasons we didn't shoot it down over land and as it approached the continental United States. One of the things we gained by it, first of all, we jammed the communication. So they couldn't send anything out anyway. Secondly, all our bases were alerted to go dark. In other words, it was just encrypted transmissions. So there's nothing they could pick up. There was no movement on these bases as it flew over. Okay. And we do the same thing with satellites. We know what time of day satellite flies over. Okay.
Yeah,
In tracking this thing, what we got to do was recalibrate our sensors and radar to pick up smaller objects, the size of them. When they cross into from international waters into a sovereign country, whether that's Canada or the United States, they're fair game. The second thing is these objects are flying at the same altitude as commercial airliners, anywhere from 20 to 30,000 feet. Chinese balloons are 60,000 feet. You know what happens when an airliner hits a bird. It can be catastrophic. So when these things are up there with all of this junk that everyone's sending up, because we recalibrated anything, we can pick up things, size of a coffee cup now. Now, if you want to argue there's trillions of dollars spent in the military and you're telling us our radar can't pick up where's that money going? But that's another discussion. So we used that balloon to our advantage in the end. And when it was free and clear, shot it down over a place where it was 45 feet of water and we could recover that. Now, with all that said, I am certainly not advocating one way or the other for what we're doing, but just giving you some of the background, and all of it is something that by listening and reading and learning these things, I picked up. I have no inside information. I'm not talking inside baseball here. And you can argue, well, what do you think the government's going to tell us? And you'd be right. Hey, so we don't get the whole story. We're never going to get the whole story. But essentially, I think that there was a method to the madness. I know that they just shot down possibly a $12, Mylar balloon. But, if you fly a drone, you have to. Oh, hi, Tim. How are you? Tim.
No, I'm still trying to get everything connected.
Oh, that's okay. We'll you just go on. We will. But again, it was flying at 20,000 feet at an altitude of commercial airlines and flight patterns, things like that. And this has happened for a long time, and there have been accidents. You can't shoot it down with guns over land because of the scatter. If you fly a drone, you have to register it with the FAA. And there are limitations on the altitude it can go and what you can do with it. So we've been kind of lax on this, and we're not being lax on it anymore. Maybe to a fault. You can make that argument, and I won't have a problem with that. I don't have a comeback for that. But I'll just leave it at that. I believe there's a method to the madness, and I know we're trying to politicize it and move on and on and on. But I think this is one of those things that's been going on for decades. Everybody's just noticing it more now. During the pandemic, everybody's noticing noises and ghosts in their house because they can't go outside. So they notice things that typically they wouldn't. And we're doing the same thing right now with the eyes to the sky. So
Well, it's the new hot thing, and of course, as of late, you are seeing one video posted after another of seeing things in the sky that must be UFOs. They have to be, and so you're just feeding into that fever, whatever the actual cause of it is. It's brought to you by untrained eyes. And conjecture, and it's put out there on the social media, and it gets 350,000 hits, and people are just blown away by it. But it goes back to what we talk about selling fear, which we will lead into here in the paranormal. It is the number one objective for a lot of people in the field, to just go out there and get scared. That's what they want to do, not get knowledge, not help. Get scared, and it's a horrible, horrible thing that we have to contend with. But when they're putting out there that hey, take out your guns and shoot at the balloons, shoot at the objects in the sky, and it just takes me back to Hollywood mentality of Independence Day.
Yeah, that's performance art.
Yeah.
When people are sitting out there with their right.
But we have local politicians that are giving that directive.
Of course. Local politics,
not actors, not Hollywood. This is government officials.
Yeah, well, it looks, you can Snapchat, TikTok, My Face, or whatever Bill Belichick calls it. Before we get to Tim to get his opinion on this, I will just say, now let's go ahead and get Tim's opinion on this.
Yeah.
So, Tim, we're obviously talking about what's going on. Dude, if you got an auto rotate and you can do it on your phone, we can get a nice wide shot of you if that's possible.
Every shot of me is a wide shot. That's just the nature of my size. But one of the biggest problems that I have with everything that I've seen about these objects in the sky is how quickly the people who are the UFO followers, I won't say like real ufologists, but people who have been kind of amateur armchair ufologists over the years, they're immediately posting about how, there's more to this than we're being told. These are probably extraterrestrial. They're making that leap in logic very quickly. And my problem with that is by doing that, you are now making it so that if something does something legitimate does happen, you're giving them a built-in excuse to just call it another balloon. Like, we need to have a real distinction into what we are willing to accept as excuses and as explanations. And if you don't have that line of demarcation, you're making it too easy to continue to not have disclosure.
Isn't it one of these things, though, Tim, that really, I mean, it's got to get down to the core of it, is when you have elected officials and their staff in front of the cameras on national news and saying, we don't know what it is that these things are. We shot it down. We're not sure. And it turns out it's a balloon. It's a friggin' balloon. You have no idea what it is. It's not like you're chasing it like the Tic Tac in that one video. The military is just tracking it at a ridiculous speed, and then it zooms off and takes. These things are barely moving, and you couldn't take 5 seconds out of your military approach to circle it, do whatever you get. Hey, Captain, it's a balloon. So let's just leave it alone. I don't understand why escalate it because, as you said, for those enthusiasts out there, this is just meat on the bone for them.
Well, because it had a payload. It wasn't just...
No. That's just one balloon. I'm talking about the smaller balloons, the small car-sized ones.
Yeah, the reason given for that was, again, in-flight patterns, commercial jets, so these things had no visible propulsion system, or more importantly, no way to steer them. So they couldn't control them. They're going to go where they're going to go, and that could be a catastrophe.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
A bird getting sucked into an engine.
But will they call a bird a UAP? No, but the government called these balloons UAPs.
Right, because you don't know what they are. Therefore, by definition, they're UAPs.
And I think part of the problem too is there's such a desire to move along the issue because we got in 2021 we got the U.S. intelligence report, Department of Intelligence report, and that was supposed to be like step one, and then we got some more information last year, but no, it really hasn't been enough to satisfy people because they're looking for that word alien. And until there's a report that comes out from the government that has that word, the military that has that word in it, they're not going to be satisfied. But they're also not going to get that word in any of these reports either. So it's in some cases it's great because we've gotten more information than we've ever got, but that information only solidifies what we already knew, which was that we don't know what these things are. Us as the average citizens are, and if the government does know, they're not telling us. Right. So now we just have that on official government letterhead.
Well, like I said, these things have been flying around in flight patterns for decades with impunity. And, I'm not advocating shoot a $400,000 missile at them, whatever, but what's the alternative? Are they harmless? Are they not harmless? But when there's no sign of propulsion or ability to navigate these things, where you can't radio, you can't go on comms and say, hey, bear left 15 degrees, you're in a flight pattern. These things are going to go where they're going to go. So, you have to protect civilians too. One of the things I wanted to turn to in the next maybe 10 minutes that we got, also because the alien thing has come up in terms of disclosure. I want to hit that because I did a couple of weeks ago and I want to circle back around on that. We're ready for disclosure. We're enlightened people, we're educated, we're ready for disclosure. My argument is we are no more ready for disclosure than Neanderthals at this point. And one of the things that the DOD is studying, possible effects of disclosure on the populace, obviously, religion, everything. So what they turn to is they're studying our reaction to COVID-19. here is a global existential threat. How did that work out for us? I mean, so it's called the Study/Post Detection Hub. It's a splinter group from the DoD, and they're studying this. And so our dress rehearsal sucked as far as something happening with COVID-19, because they're thinking about things like disinformation now with this kind of stuff. Social and religious beliefs, how's that going to affect everybody? But we're so broken off tribally right now that they're kind of concerned about it, because the number one thing that they're trying to do is do it in a way that the public doesn't panic or turn on each other. And we just had 2 years ago an existential threat, and so all of you that were ready for disclosure, I don't know, fight me on that. Convince me.
Well, I listen. I'm not going to say that we didn't show that we weren't ready in some regards for this information, but we all.
Oh, we lost Tim again. Usually Tim is like his like we're jealous of his setup.
He has a radio show. I think he's doing it though from his basement, or the bomb shelter, one or the other.
Well, the point is, we're panicky people.
Okay. I mean, how long have I been saying it, Ken?
We're panicky people.
How long on this show have I brought up time and again? Disclosure will never work. Never work. It's just we are a fear-based species. Well, we're sold on fear. We're programmed on fear to begin with. And so something like this comes up, and there's no way in hell that there will be unless the aliens come down and they attack us. And
this
then
is Tim. I'm sucking it up big time. Elise, I think you're probably referring to a speech Ronald Reagan gave decades ago, where he said if there was an existential threat, the global community will come together. But the thing I want to touch on too, really quickly, and I was kind of, I'm killing time here because I'd like Tim to weigh in on this, but as far as telling people what they really want to hear, I mean, I don't think we are ready for that, because if we encountered a hostile civilization, right, and the goal was to take over the planet, Tim's back, cool. All right, there he is.
I finally got it to hold still in the right spot and everything. And
all right, so I want to make this point real quick before we bring anybody on. If we were to enter into the War of the Worlds scenario, how would an advanced civilization do it? I would suggest to you they would do it with a virus, because you don't want to necessarily blow up everything, because you don't want to destroy the resources. You don't want to destroy the infrastructure. You don't want to contaminate anything. You don't want a messy war.
If you're looking at their weapons to be equal to ours, Ken.
Right, but you would do it in as clean a way possible. This is why we fly unmanned drones now, so we don't lose forces. So somebody more advanced than us, you would introduce a virus and then just clean up the mess, and then your planet is in great shape. If we were to come up with something that would immunize the population against said virus, how do you think that would turn out? Discuss amongst yourselves.
Well, no, anything that needs to be done by opinion, we're screwed.
Sarah, you know what I'm talking about, right?
I mean, there is every possible scenario out there that it's the same thing that I've argued about before too. If the aliens wanted to reveal themselves, they talk about disclosure, they'll reveal themselves. There's nothing on this planet to stop them. And if they want to keep secret, they'll keep secret. There's nothing on this planet to stop them. I believe the same thing on an attack on this planet. If they wanted to attack this planet, there's nothing that we would do to stop them. And it would not be, let's go ahead and give them a virus Well, they may figure it out. Well, they'll probably kill themselves arguing over figuring it out. So, no matter, it's a win-win for the universe over us. I don't foresee a scenario, that is going to be that 2 hour Hollywood movie. Things will happen over time,
Right.
but as you said, Ken, we as a species, we couldn't handle it. There's no way in hell we could. Tim, your thoughts before we close out
I
this
mean,
and bottom of the hour?
I do think that we showed, because when that report did come out, for a lot of people, this was, all of us in this room and all of us, in the StreamYard room and everybody that's watching probably thought no big deal when that information was released, because we followed this kind of topic for a long time. But for the average common person, when they saw that come out, that was earth-shattering news to them. And if you look at the way that that was handled, it was a positive sign, because not only was it that people, for the most part, didn't freak out about it, but it was covered by the news media. It was covered in a serious fashion. The information was able to get out. People that had the information were able to share it. So I actually think it was kind of a good dress rehearsal for more information being released. And I think it gives me a better feeling about what would happen if more information came out on a slow basis. If they came and landed on the White House lawn, that proverbial first contact, then I think you would really have to see how people handled it then,
Oh yeah.
because that's a completely different scenario. And we got to remember too, what have we been talking about for the last 3 years, 4 years? Strange lights in the sky. That's all that it's been. There has not been a spotting of an actual, that we can tell it's a ship. There has not been a spotting of an extraterrestrial biological entity. These are just lights in the sky, and those lights in the sky still allow people to kind of have in their heart of hearts, maybe it could just be a balloon or something else that we're not really sure. So they haven't yet had that, holy crap moment yet.
Yeah. I mean, we're shooting water bottles out of the sky. What happens when Jeff Goldblum shows up in the mothership? Like,
Yeah.
covers man.
Then we need Will Smith to say, "Welcome to Earth."
Maybe I will go around slapping the aliens.
Yeah.
It's like, what, too soon?
Boy, are you guys socially programmed.
Too soon? Tim's out again.
No. I'm trying to clean my camera off. I'm going to go dark for a second.
All right. Well, it's a good time to introduce the guests in the wing, Ken, and what we're going to be talking about for the bulk of the show. And hopefully Tim will be able to chime in on a lot of this. I'm sure he will.
Yeah. What I love about Tim is Tim really has a toe in all the different facets and worlds that we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, there was an article, as some quick background, there was an article posted online by a local television station. And basically it was an interview with an established company that deals with the paranormal in a commercial sense, that had established a new ghost tour in Providence, Rhode Island. Sounds pretty innocuous enough. There is already an established ghost tour in the city of Providence, Rhode Island. And this is a trend that we're starting to see across the country, where franchises are starting to come in for a piece of the action. And I want to tell you right up front that there's nobody on this show, or nobody we're going to bring on, that doesn't understand free enterprise and capitalism and competition. So this is not a case of in some way undermining those principles. It's not. It is essentially a commerce issue where Walmart moves in next to your grandparents' country store. What's the end game here? So with that, this is what we're going to be discussing tonight. And I'd like to bring on a couple of entrepreneurs, a couple of small business women who run tours. And our first guest was on the periphery of this particular article here in Rhode Island in Providence. And she is the co-owner and co-founder of the Providence Ghost Tour, Courtney Edge Matos. So we're going to bring in Courtney now. How are you this evening?
Hi, how are you?
Oh, we're doing great. And also joining us is the owner of the Tucson Ghost Tours and founder and lead investigator of the Tucson Ghost Society, Becky McKitty Gidenson. I had to get the name right. So, coming to us from Arizona, please welcome Becky to the show.
Hi, how are you guys doing tonight?
Becky, we're doing great. So, this is essentially, and by the way, this is Tim Weisberg, who's
Hello.
with me tonight. Um,
Hello.
Tim has an extensive background in these kind of things. So, I am going to ask him, in his position as host of Spooky South Coast on WBSM, from Saturday nights from 10 to midnight. He has dipped a toe in all sorts of facets of things that we are going to discuss this evening in relation to this. But first, because this is the reason we're all here, I want to give Courtney the floor right now. I know you were out of the country when a lot of this happened, and then this is what you walked back into. So I want you to tell us your thoughts and give you a platform here to tell us, as an entrepreneur, a small business person who got this off the ground from the grassroots, what are your thoughts about this particular situation?
Sure. So I was actually in Iceland, and I happened to check my phone because I had Wi-Fi, and I had a lot of messages from a lot of people, who had very strong thoughts on that. Um, so I'm actually the sole owner of the tour. I started it with a partner back in, I think, 2006 is when we started it, and I've since bought the tour. It is my own tour. So the research for the tour has continued for 17 years. It's been an unfolding process. I have great personal connection to this tour. This year, I think it was really interesting. We started doing a lot more investigative work on the tour, and opening those investigations up to the public and, well, not to the public, but like to ticket purchasers. Um, and the interactions we had with our spirits were amazing. And it felt like that connection was based on 17 years of them getting to know me. Um, so I have a lot of personal connection to it. I was not the only ghost tour in town when I started my tour. Rory Raven, who so many of you in the paranormal community are very familiar with, he started the first ghost tour in Providence. He wrote a book, Haunted Providence. He has so much claim and stake in this. When my former business partner and I, who's wonderful, it was a very amicable parting of ways, but when we started our tour, we made a very conscious effort that our tour was not the same as Rory's tour, that his tour, we were going to uplift that. We were going to refer people to that tour, and we weren't going to tread on his territory. So he primarily went up and down Benefit Street in Providence. We do a little dab into Benefit Street, but for the most part, we're a little further up the hill. I think two tours can exist when there's a piece of respect. The way that this has been presented to me, and I haven't spoken with the other company, so I don't know what their take on that article or that interview was. Um, it didn't feel respectful, and that's uncomfortable. I think you can definitely have collegial relationships with people who are willing to do so. It did not feel like that. At this point, to me, it doesn't feel like that's the case. It feels like we're coming in and we're going to squash you like a bug, and I will be quite annoyed if I'm that bug. So
Right. Tim, there in the actual interview itself, there were a couple of things you and I have talked about this that there were a couple of things that triggered me to the point where, because I've known Courtney, I mean, they do things for charity. They did, I mean, they're part of the fabric of the community. They're not actors that come in reading from a script, and I mean, they have an investment in the community. There were a couple of things that, I mean, we talked about that kind of rubbed us the wrong way. I mean, you have an opportunity right now to maybe cover some of the things that bothered you, and speak directly to Courtney on that.
Well, first of all, one of the things that bothered me is Courtney knows I reached out to her and I reached out to the other company and I said, I'd like to have both of you come on and we can go back and forth about this and talk about this, which has been a successful formula for some previous editions of Spooky South Coast. Just one quick thing I'll mention is there was a time when a board game company was making a King Philip's War board game, and a professor of native studies who is native herself at Rhode Island College took offense to that. And they were going back and forth in the press. We had both sides on. By the end of the show, they were agreeing to work together to make sure that the board game would be historically accurate, and they would give money back for, helping with some native studies. So I like to try to think that we can be that bridge when there is a gap like that. So I reached out to both sides. Obviously, Courtney's travel affected her being able to join us, but I was told somebody from the other company, which, I'm just going to say it, U.S. Ghost Adventures, was going to join us, and they never called in. And so I never heard back from them after that. Never heard an email as to why they didn't call in. So I think they've made it pretty clear that they don't really have any intention on answering the questions that we have. So let me just put that out there first, that I never got any answers to any of the things that I'm going to bring up. But I want to know, what made them think that there was a need for a second tour, whereas Courtney's had a very successful tour for over a decade. What would they do to make it different? How did they come up with their tour, which is a key question in a lot of the cities that they have come up with tours for, because there have been some accusations from people about where they might have actually gotten the material from. When other tour guides' personal stories are showing up in the tours that they're giving, that's a red flag for me. When I see advertisements locally for, we're looking for somebody to write a Newport ghost tour for this company, we're going to pay you $250 a month. Well, the first thing that pops into my head is, what's your process for knowing where that information is coming from and how valid and legitimate it is if you're just hiring a freelancer looking for a writing gig? So there's all these questions that I think need to be answered. But the story itself, Ken, you pointed this out, and Courtney, you reacted to it. There was that little bit of the discussion where it was mentioned that, how does the other tour, being Courtney's tour, how do they feel about, you moving in? Have you gotten any weird looks? And then the tour guide for U.S. Ghost Adventures said, yeah, I was out taking photos and I kind of got this funny look. And I had to go over that a couple of times, because to me, it seemed like it was the reporter who, Ken and I know, and Courtney, RJ Heim is not a reporter. He's a meteorologist, but he likes to write about paranormal things. It's a passion for him. But I don't really fault him for not asking the follow-up question of, well, what actually happened? Or for reaching out to Courtney and saying, did this actually happen? So that was part of the kind of benefit of the doubt that I had to give them, that maybe they were kind of being set up to answer that question that way. But also, at the same time, it seems kind of par for the course for the attitude that this company has had in some of the other cities they've worked in.
Yeah, the direct quote was from the paper. He ran into the competition while taking pictures for his company's website. NBC 10 asked the gentleman there if they, meaning your staff, if they were like, oh, you're moving in on our territory. Now, this is the reporter saying this. The response was, actually, it was a little bit like that. He laughed. Hey, that's why they put all the fast food restaurants on the same block. So, Courtney, we've had the conversation. How do you respond to that?
To my knowledge, that didn't happen. Like I said, there is space. I don't have the right to have the only ghost tour in town. I just don't. I don't have the right to have the only anything in town. That's not how our businesses work in the United States. Maybe that works differently in other places, but it's not a question of it not being appropriate for them to have another business. It's just that this interaction didn't happen. And so when you're starting anything out with a lie, it really calls into question a lot of other things.
Correct.
And if I was going to say, if I can just address that quote, I thought that was kind of a bullshit quote to say, all the fast food restaurants are on the same block. Okay, but nobody from Wendy's is walking into McDonald's, learning how to cook a Big Mac, learning all the ways that they make the Big Mac, and then going over to Wendy's and creating an identical version of the Big Mac. And that's the difference here. This isn't just somebody else doing something their way and somebody else doing something their way. This is a history that this organization has of coming in and basically honing in on somebody's territory, taking over the stories and then just trying by sheer force of volume, which by the way is a house of mirrors, really, that they are this big giant company. And it's really trying to turn that into, pushing somebody out based on intimidation.
Yeah. And I want to ask Becky on this to get her perspective. George, could you bring up that website page again for U.S. Ghost Adventures, if you could, real quick? There's something I want to touch on this. First of all, the name of the company, U.S. Ghost Adventures, which is a play on a very, very successful TV franchise. You could call yourself anything. So they haven't appropriated it, but they've certainly, manipulated it to have that name. The other thing that bothered me, welcome to the Providence Ghost Tour. And okay, now that bothered me a little bit because, yeah, exactly. And that is Courtney's business. So that bothered me a little bit because there seems to be a pattern of sort of, well, I'm just going to say appropriating variations on established names, which, I mean, nobody's going to go to court over this thing, but it just seems to me to be a little funny, to do something like that. So there's a pattern involved with this. And I'll let you, comment on that as we go along. I wanted to bring Becky into the conversation. Becky, I mean, obviously it's a different type of situation where you are in Tucson because, I mean, my reading up on this is there are a lot of ghost tours in the state of Arizona, Tucson, Brisbane, etc. My point is that you folks as entrepreneurs and small businesses, when you decided to take your passion for the paranormal and for history, combine those things, start a business, create an LLC, file all that paperwork, get licensing, permits, insurance, payroll, taxes. You assume all that responsibility, crowd control, crowd safety. When you hear this type of thing, is this something that's equally prevalent, do you feel, where you are? Or beyond that, is this something that is growing, the franchise aspect of this?
Oh, it definitely is. I've been lucky. I had a national chain come to Tucson once, but they ended up not working out and leaving. But I do have the companies coming in trying to do ghost hunts here and things like that. And it's difficult because, when you have a national company like that, of course, they have the more advertising, they have the more money to put into it and things like that. And I think it's just something that is kind of taking, fortunately. And what bothers me is the fact that it's not the personal touch. They don't have the actual stories, the actual history, because, like you said, they're like hiring people to do it, or they're, going off of other things that they've heard. My tour, basically everything is personal. So I've had personal contact with most of everything I've, presented on my tour. There's only like one or two that's hearsay because I wasn't around when it was open. But for the most part, it's personal stuff. And that's what kind of makes everything so special, I think. And then you get these national chains moving in and they're trying to take it over, but they don't have that personal touch. So I don't know. Maybe they are trying to get it from tours like ours to give that personal touch. Who knows?
Right. Well, that's the kind of thing. In this particular article, the gentleman said, in my research, I found out that there's a market for these things. So you have to define research. I mean, you just go on the internet, type in ghost tours, or, I mean, we've all been on one. I've never felt, the impetus to go create a ghost tour just because I've been on some, and some really great ones here in New England. But I never, felt the need to, hey, I want in on the action or anything like that. One of the things.
But if I can jump in for a second, Kevin, that's one of the $1 million questions here. And one of the questions that I would have for U.S. Ghost Adventures is, did you ever create a tour in any city that didn't already have one? Because if you look at their list of tours, I'm just going to guess, based on my knowledge of the paranormal, that all of these cities had pre-existing tours. And so if that's the case, is your model that you want to bring ghost tours to people, or is that your model you want to go to where people are already going on ghost tours and create your own? And I think that there's a big difference in that, because that shows to me the idea of the intent behind it, and then the expectation of where they will go with it.
Right. I want to flesh out a little something Becky got into. I was going to save this for a little later, but let's do it now. And I don't know if either of you are aware of Tim's background, so I'm going to have him, if he doesn't mind, kind of give a little bit of his resume in terms of research, writing, history, and things like that. And then I'll continue with my question. So, Tim, not to embarrass you, but if you could just give him a little background of, the things that you've done.
Well, I've worked on a couple of different television shows as a writer, a researcher, a producer. So, like, I know what it's like to try to acquire these stories, to talk to the witnesses, the same things that you are probably doing when you are looking for information to add into a tour, and what anybody that's building a tour should probably be doing. And there, of course, there is some sense of, I'm going to go on the internet and find these places that people have talked about already, but you never just take that story from somebody and just use that directly. So if my work in that genre of looking up all these cases and finding all these haunted places has taught me anything, it's that you want to keep people like yourselves as sources, as resources, as people you can reach out to and get information and use their network and be connected with them. And instead, I see far too often, and it happens with the television programs too, where it has to be a complete cutoff from everybody. If they want to bring you on, Courtney, to talk about a haunted place in Providence for an episode, they'll say, don't mention that you're a tour guide. Like, no, I think the great thing is to mention that you're a tour guide, because that shows just how common and constant this activity is. So anyway, long story short, that's what I've done. I've just done a lot of writing and researching because I like to work from home and not have to ever leave the house.
Nice. So the point here, to flesh it out, is the accuracy of the information that is given out on these tours. And people seem to be more interested in more of the salacious details in this particular article. And I'm not going to, because I don't know how this information was provided, I am going to, the tenor and tone of the article, I'm going to say that R.J. Heim was told this. Things like when he referred to Providence writer Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, let's just stop right there. Okay, he was in Providence for like 20 minutes. I'm speaking metaphorically. Met Sarah Whitman, who he would go on to have a relationship. The Shuttered House was about werewolves. Bram Stoker apparently had a house in Rhode Island.
Isn't it also called the Shunned House?
I'm not sure.
Not
maybe
the Shuttered House.
Maybe he had a house in Pawtucket.
Sorry.
Like, Becky's looking at this like, I have no idea what Pawtucket is. It's just a small city, and this just went on. And for those of us like, Tim, myself, Courtney, and others, our heads are about to split open.
But we can. I'm going to just keep cutting you off, Ken. I blame my earbuds. It's one thing to have it be a mistake. So maybe you've got a new tour guide. This guy, Bill, that they interviewed, you've got a new tour guide that's just learning things and hasn't memorized the script yet. Or maybe R.J. Heim doesn't really know all this stuff and he's making a little bit of a mistake. Who knows? On the website for U.S. Ghost Adventures, for their Providence tour, and if they throw it back up on screen, you can probably see the exact paragraph. They talk about Bram Stoker being a resident of Providence. It doesn't take anything more than a quick Google search and a click on a Wikipedia page to know that never happened.
Right. So that's like saying Vlad Tepes lived in Phoenix, Becky. You know what I mean? It's like you would just like. And Becky, I mean, listen, I know you through other people, mutual friends, and the thing that comes up about you a lot, very pragmatic, calls a spade. Not every place is haunted. Make sure you know who's going into your house. You
Yes.
know, you think objectively. So when you're looking at this and you put the time and effort into getting information, the easiest thing to say, oh, there's a ghost here, there's a ghost there, and somebody was murdered here, and you get all these anecdotal tales that everybody tells you, and you go no further than that. So to have someone come in off a script who's like, make sure you emphasize this, scare the crap out of these people because they'll come back. You have to tell me, really, in all honesty, how you feel when you hear these type of things coming from other tours, and you're just, you know, I can imagine that just must make you go off the rails.
Yeah, not happy about things like that. I'm one of those people that I am totally against making this scary to begin with. My tours have always been, family friendly. I don't believe that this should be something that you present as scary. Just like I don't believe that you should present everything as a ghost. I'm very, like you said, very practical. I believe in that debunking stuff. So when people move in and they're just trying to change everything in a town that's not true, yeah, that's aggravating.
Yeah, Courtney, I'm going to ask you the same question as in terms of accuracy of information. You know, I know the answer to this, but I want you in your own words. How important is that to you? Because, I mean, we talk about fact, truth being stranger than fiction sometimes when you dig into this thing. And if there's going to be competition, at least, I mean, my God, we heard Becky say they have more resources. They're Walmart. They've got, tours in 20 states. That seems to be a problem. Number one, when somebody will come in and take your material, which is why a lot of times group tours don't let you record or video until you come to a stop, and the inaccuracy of information, that would drive me crazy. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think you have a responsibility. By day, I'm a social worker, so understanding people's stories, understanding people's circumstances, and getting it right is really important to me on a very core level. I've gotten it wrong sometimes on the tour. We thought we had accurate information, and then you realize, nope, that's not it. So you have to make that adjustment. You have to own your mistakes and then move forward. Everybody makes mistakes. We're human, presumably.
Sure.
So, but you really have to be careful and intentional, and want the information to be accurate.
Absolutely. I want to bring George back in here because we're going to go to break very shortly. When we come back, we've got another guest we're going to bring on. George, is there something that went through your mind as everyone's talking about this you want to hit on real quick before we pay some bills?
Well, yeah, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here in just a simple sense, listening to this conversation that Walmart exists and continues to exist and continues to thrive. Now, when you go into Walmart, you don't see the best quality of people as opposed to a high quality grocery store. And I think that some of these organizations know that, no different than those of us who have been paranormal investigators in residential cases. And you have a homeowner who wishes to have a demon. And no matter how
Mm.
much you explain to them that there is no demon, they will look for a new team to come in and spray the holy water and bring out the crucifix and talk about the tightness in their chest and the heaviness in the room. And then they can go, see, I was right. And there will be people who will go to your locations and seeking out these organizations that are going to sensationalize the tour, possibly even have people running around with sheets with holes cut out for their eyes, simply due to the fact that that's what their expectation is. And unfortunately, as we talked about earlier in the show, fear sells. And people are looking to go every time to a location that is historically haunted and seek out fear. They want to be scared. If they're taking a date out for that night, they want to be scared. And unfortunately, some of these people, they're what they're doing knowing human nature. And it shouldn't be that circumstance or that way, but unfortunately, this is what we have to contend with. If you guys want to respond to that on the other side of the break, or, we've got about 2 minutes left if anybody wants to jump in. I'm sure, Tim, you do.
Well, I mean, I agree that, we're looking at this from the perspective of the people who know the stories. And so for the common person that's coming into a city, visiting, and says, I think I'm going to take a ghost tour while I'm here, they're not going to know all the differences. But the problem there is now you feed the wrong information to people that didn't know any better, and then that suddenly becomes the story. That becomes the story now that we have to go up against and have to debunk. So every time Courtney's on a tour, she gets somebody who says, well, I heard that, that Bram Stoker lived in Providence. And then you have to be put in that position of trying to be the one to correct what they think is the correct information already. And I think that that's the biggest problem with these fly-by-night tours, for lack of a better term. They just come in and they bombard you with information that's incorrect. And it's happened for years in Salem. The Salem tour guides rail about it all the time because it has ruined people's perceptions of what is the actual story and has actually stepped on the actual history of that city.
Yep.
Becky, have you ever had that happen where you had to do a cleanup on aisle 3?
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Real quickly. I mean, we can come back and continue, but where, it's like, where'd you get this information from? They're telling you, no, you're wrong.
Yeah, I think that happens just in general, no matter what you do in life. But yeah, that's definitely something that has happened.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those situations that we have to contend with in every aspect of this field. So now you guys are exposed to it. Have fun. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, guys. Top of the hour break. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue this discussion. We have another guest joining us as well. Don't go anywhere, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, the thumbs up, and the reminder bell. You're watching Dead Air Live on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. Stay with us, guys. We'll be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
As UFO reports come in from around the world, the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, is there. We continue to explore new cases and build our massive database. We share our information with the world in a number of ways. If you would like to be part of our investigative team, you are always welcome. What could be more exciting than exploring the UFO question firsthand? Join MUFON, find your friends.
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small, esoteric getaways are limited and do fill fast. So, go to MysteriousAdventureTours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
All right, guys, welcome back to our second hour. Oh, he's gone again. There he is. Let me bring him back down for just a second. And thank you guys for joining us. The second hour of our show here on Dead Air Live. Now, we can't really talk about our newer sponsor, which is American Ghost Hunters Destination Fear Adventures, but we can talk about our current sponsor, Ken. So why don't you let everybody in on this, because you want to check it out for sure.
Yeah, let's get their banner up there so we can give them a proper go-to. Okay, Dead Air wants to welcome Fuel Up for sponsoring this show. This new year, remember the importance of proper hydration. Dehydration can lead to inflammation and even degenerative disease, so hydration is crucial. If you're like me, spends a lot of time at a computer, it's important. The Fuel Up hydration system is designed to support motivation, concentration, and rejuvenation with the best immune-enhancing delivery system available. Experience the benefits of Fuel Up with their Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. If you visit fuelup.gg, you see it on the air/dead air, you get their special offer that includes free shipping. So Fuel Up for life. And we want to thank Fuel Up for sponsoring Dead Air.
Absolutely. Keeps me going, boy, I can tell you. But all right, time to get back to our wonderful guests and our topic tonight. Of course, with us, Tim Weisberg and Courtney, coming from, go ahead, Providence Ghost Tour. By the way, I visited Providence once. Oh, my God, that is a beautiful city.
It's a great city. Yeah.
Becky from Tucson Ghost Tour.
Drove through it really fast.
And who do we have next right now but our dear friend, part of Monday Night Monsters, Myths, and Legends, Christopher Rondina.
Hey, folks. How are you doing tonight?
Very well. Thank you.
Really good. Really good.
I got to hop out for a second and close the door. I let the dogs out. So hang on.
Woof, 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 woof. One of the things I wanted to get into a little bit with this is intention. Now, competition can be a great thing. It can work one of two ways. It can motivate you to do better, or it can be a burden, because essentially the end game sometimes is monopolization. Dominate the competition. And that's where it goes wrong. And it's why I asked Chris to come on and join us tonight, because you have a lot in common, in as much as Christopher ran what I thought was an exceptional ghost tour out of Newport, Rhode Island. And I'm going to get out of the way and let him tell you a little bit about his experience there and the other side of this type of thing. So, Christopher, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I back in, I guess it was about 1997, 1998, give or take. I'm too old to remember specifics on that one, but about 25 years ago, I launched my first graveyard tour in Newport, Rhode Island, which is a beautiful historic city, and ran it very successfully for several years. And a couple of years down the line, a pair of entrepreneurs who had a ghost tour business elsewhere showed up in Newport looking to purchase my tour. And at the time, I wasn't interested in selling, and so I sort of put them off, and learned that they were approaching other people in town, and they ended up optioning a woman who had a book on ghosts in Newport, and created a ghost tour based on her book. and then approached me again and said, listen, we're still very interested in buying your tour. And ultimately I told them I wasn't willing to sell it, but I was willing to license the tour to them, because I had actually moved out of town at that point. The commute was a little bit of a challenge. And so they went ahead and they licensed the tour. Within a year, two major things happened. They contacted the woman they had licensed the book from to create their original tour, or their first version of the Newport tour, and told her that they weren't making much money on her tour, so they were canceling the contract, but contended that they still owned the rights to what they had created, which is all based on her research. And then they did exactly the same thing to me. They told me that the revenue from their version of my tour had not even paid for its own advertising costs, so they were canceling it, didn't owe me a nickel, but they still owned the rights to everything. And I had a contract in hand, and I said, listen, I don't know what planet you live on or why you think it works this way, but obviously, you can't simply tell me that you own my tour and that you don't owe me a nickel. They did eventually back off on that, but they didn't back off on the second tour that they created, and they started a campaign to stamp out anyone else, including me, who ran a tour. They ended up getting one of their people got a job at the local Convention and Visitors Bureau, would actually discard flyers belonging to other ghost tours and everything, and just it was 100%. It was sleazy. Absolutely, it was sleazy. It was underhanded. It was incredibly. I imagine there's some degree of illegality to what they were doing, but they got away with it because they had already established themselves in another city down south with a very big tour. They had some money behind them, and they were willing to do anything. They pulled out all the stops, and they did everything they could to crush everything around them. Spent the summers running an absolutely cheesy tour in Newport with the same as the dime store Dracula cape and the top hat and the lantern. Hired anybody who could learn their script, and so the product that people were getting with this brand new tour with the glitzy marketing was the cheapest, most low-end version of a ghost tour you could get. They happily manufactured their own facts when they couldn't find enough ghosts within a square mile area to actually fill up the tour. They made up their own ghosts, and to this day they continue to do that. And to me, that's the epitome of what I think you've been talking about this evening, is this sort of the zero integrity, large machines that come along and steamroll the locals and do it without an ounce of basic, no ethics, no integrity whatsoever. And unfortunately, I think that that's happening with historic properties. That's happening with ghost tours. I know in Providence, of course, Courtney, I'm sure you're well aware, what's going on there. And I think that's these big organizations. They're not even that big, the folks that I interacted with, but even still, it's happening. And I think that it's an absolute shame. Of course, free enterprise is a thing, and I suppose that the people who have the most successful business tactics win. But when there's no integrity, they're just damaging the entire thing. They're giving a shoddy product, and I think that it's unforgivable.
Got feedback there. Somebody's really loud in there, I think. All right, it's gone now. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right. Yeah. I agree with you 1,000%, Chris, and with Becky and with Courtney with all of this, but it's what we contend with. It's not going to go away. It's no different. Ken knows this. We've had discussions many a time where these YouTubers are going into historically haunted locations, and the only background information they have is what movie they watched, or what show they watched, and then they go in there and start saying, well, I know the demon is here, and I know the devil is here, and I know this creature or this, and this is what they, and then you look at their website and they've got 300,000 views.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's the nature of the beast. This is what we contend with. Let me ask Becky as an example. Becky, where you guys are at, is there some sort of a collaboration with the Historical Society in your region where you actually have some sort of a documentation in your office, or where the public can see to say, this is historically accurate, unlike others, however you would put that? Does that kind of thing exist?
No, unfortunately, it does not. I have connections with the historical societies, but we don't have any type of certificates or anything like that.
Courtney?
No, I mean, I've done the work within the historical societies to gather the information. I'm actually going to be going back on a regular basis to kind of expand some of my knowledge. I think that's important to have that ongoing knowledge. But they don't offer like a certification. They don't offer a process. When my tour partner and I first started the tour, we actually used to carry photocopies of all of our research in backpacks because we were like, everybody's going to want to know like, what document is that from? And we would be able to provide it right away. And I must say, nobody ever asked us for any of the information in our backpacks.
So your tour, as far as the perspective of the tourists coming there, could be as erroneous as any other organization coming in because they're not fact checking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the average customer, and I mean, anytime I'm a customer, how diligent am I with researching, who I'm going to see or what I'm doing? Probably not that diligent. I'm probably of an average rating for that. So I think most people are looking for something that seems fun, that has good reviews on, any of the review sites or something if you're exploring that. And you hope that it's accurate. Maybe it's not. I have done my best to make sure that I'm accurate, but does anybody know or care? Maybe, maybe not. We have folks from the state archives that come to our tour every year because they just enjoy us. So to me, that's always sort of like my badge of honor. Like if they're willing to take my tour and like nod their heads and feel enthusiastic about that, that makes me feel good about what I'm doing.
Yeah. Quick question for Becky and Courtney. Now, Courtney, you've expanded a little bit into the boat tours.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that? You had obviously the walking tour on the east side, Benefit Street, et cetera, and so forth. But then you went one step further, and now you give the boat tours, which is something really exciting.
Yeah, so I partner with Providence Riverboat Company and with La Gondola Providence. So I actually have two aquatic partnerships. And they're two separate tours. I think they share maybe one or two stories in common because it is the Providence River. It's only got so much space. You can't purchase their tickets through my site. You can purchase tickets for the riverboat tours through Providence Riverboat and La Gondola's tours through La Gondola Providence. But there are stories that are further down city. So the walking tour is on College Hill, so it's up on the east side. But there are plenty of stories down in sort of the down city area of Providence. So the boats and the gondolas make that more accessible. You're not going right up to the buildings, obviously, because the boats don't go right up to the buildings. But you can tell it from that atmosphere. And it's fun. And it lets us tell a different piece of history because Providence is a city that has evolved in neighborhoods, right? So this area evolved first. Then this area evolved next, and the landscape has changed. So we kind of get to connect different historical dots and just pieces of Providence, which is very nice.
Now, Becky, have you in the past, or do you still do riding tours?
I did in the past. Unfortunately, COVID kind of shut down a lot. And because of COVID, one of the buildings, my main start, ended up closing, and I just never redid it. But at one point in time, I was doing driving tours. Basically, now I've expanded into just doing special events.
Right. And I know some people in Chicago, which is a big tour city, true crime tours, historical tours. And Chris, of John Winterbauer, who was part of Troy Taylor's company. And I know that there's sort of like an uneasy alliance there, but an alliance nonetheless. Lots of ghost tours where, sometimes the staff goes to, like, they flip-flop between the different companies. And there have been some stories about people disabling the other tour's bus and things in the past. Oh yeah, horror stories like that because it gets quite competitive.
Oh my God.
So that brings me to the idea that how long is it before someone says, hey, that boat tour is a pretty good idea? Because in my research, I know that people have buses and things like that. Not to be, the harbinger of, bad news or anything like that, but I would imagine that would be something that would just make you go off the rails, Courtney. Because there's something obviously that is mistrustful about the statement. It's like, well, I looked into this because no, you own haunted property. I'm speaking of a company here. You own haunted property. You conduct ghost hunts, and now we're going to get into the ghost tour business. So, what's the end game here? Is it to drive everyone out, as some of the underhanded things that Chris had to endure? With a pretty, I've taken Chris's tour years ago. We had a ball. We went back every year before Christopher and I actually became friends. I would bring my family. You got to go on this thing. But this idea that research is being done, and what it is basically you're trying to appropriate as many ideas as possible. That's the bottom line.
Something that somebody said to me years ago, which I fully agree with, despite the fact that it was under unfortunate circumstances, they said nobody owns history. If another person comes along and they want to do a ghost tour in the same town that I'm operating in, the same town that Courtney or Becky is operating in, there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is that there are very few towns, especially if they're the kind of town that can support a ghost tour. It probably has a tourism industry of some kind, and there's very few tourism towns that don't have enough people coming in to support multiple businesses. Look at the number of restaurants in Providence or Chicago. Look at the number of of hotels. That's a lot of people, and there's no reason in the world it shouldn't be able to support multiple touring companies. So the question is why does any company need to come along and work actively to one up everyone else? Does it need to actively try to stamp out competition, or to basically to become the McDonald's or the Walmart of the tourism industry? Just feed people what they want without any sense of integrity, without any sense of historical accuracy. And that's, I think, where the problem lies. It's not the competition. The competition is fine. It's that they want to give you the most palatable, genericized, easy. It's the Michael Bay film, the one that that you're going to get an explosion every 2 minutes, and it's just going to be a spectacle. And that's, I think, a shame, because it's damaging the entire idea of the industry. It's damaging the entire not just the paranormal industry, which to some degree it does, but also the tourism industry, because a lot of these tours do not have phenomenal reviews. If you go back and you look at the reviews, people will tell you that it was cheesy, or that the guide stumbled over the script, didn't seem to know what they were talking about.
There you go, right there.
Or they couldn't go off script. If you ask them a question, they'd have no idea what to tell, because they're basically a 23-year-old kid who had the option between working for the ghost tour or working for McDonald's, and they don't know anything about it. And that just damages the entire thing. And I think that's something that we legitimately is a concern. I don't know that there's any way to change it other than giving a much better product. But I think that even giving a better product isn't enough, because, like you were saying earlier, people are out there for the thrill. They want the scary stuff. They want the spooky stuff. They want it to sound exactly like The Conjuring or the Amityville Horror. They want the most gruesome stories, the most demonic stories. And for them, if you're saying, well, this may or may not be true, or the movie sort of exaggerated events, that's not as exciting to them. And unfortunately, I think that ends up putting a nail in everybody's tire.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head, though, Chris, when you were talking about the one that is stumbling over his lines or can't go off script. And I can guarantee you one of the things that had attracted Ken and his family to your tours was your charisma. And I think it's an important part for any tour guide to have that charisma. If there is Becky's tour in Tucson has nothing but charismatic people. They're knowledgeable. They're good at public speaking, and they're going to knock down anybody that comes in there dressed in ghost suits and top hats. And it's a big, big difference. Your performance only goes to the level of believability. And when you're talking historically, that lends credence to what it is that you're saying when you know it you're knowledgeable, and you're charismatic in what you're doing. You could also turn the coin over and have those people who are just giving you absolute bullshit stories, but if they sound charismatic and convincing, they are going to hold the attention of their audience. So it really is down to individual staffing, who's going to be there and who's going to do a better job. You could throw a ton of money at your employees, but if your employees are not somebody who could hold the attention of more than one person at a time, they're screwed no matter what. They're just not going to survive. They can't.
Unfortunately, that's true. But you know, as much as I want to believe that level of quality and performance, makes a big difference, the truth is that a lot of these, these sort of generic cattle call ghost tour companies do great because they're selling the package so well before you arrive that by the time you've bought the ticket and gotten in line for the ghost tour, the quality note doesn't matter anymore. You've paid your price. They don't expect repeat customers. They assume that there's just enough people coming through the sort of meat grinder that they're going to always have people, on the hook. And that's the part where the sleazy salesman aspect comes in, because they're just selling a bill of goods, and the ultimate quality ends up suffering.
Yeah, I got a question for Tim here before I go to Becky and Courtney. So, because, and Becky probably does too, maybe Chris, but we know the players in this game, Tim and I. And when you begin to, okay, I own a haunted property, the bed and breakfast, Lizzie Borden, we want to get into the ghost hunt business. We want to expand into the ghost tour business. I mean, what is the impetus behind that, Tim? Is it just strictly money? Can we put aside, a modicum of interest in the paranormal because you're purchasing these properties and you want to get a toe into the water here? But at the end of the day, is anybody proficient enough who hasn't spent years doing this to just say, we want into this, now we want to do ghost tours, now we want to do ghost hunts, now we want to put on a paranormal conference and invite people there? I mean, why do you do that? Is it just as simple as revenue?
Well, I think that so this particular company, U.S. Ghost Adventures, started off with the tours. Lizzie Borden was their first time purchasing a haunted location and running ghost hunts. And I think that you're going to see them try to utilize this model. From my understanding, there was an offer made from the company toward the Conjuring House, but it was rejected. So they are looking to possibly buy other haunted locations and do the same. But what I found really interesting about this, and it's something that's kind of been lost in this discussion, is the argument is that this tour company should be able to come in and run a ghost tour in a city where there's already established tour, because that's just capitalism, right? And nobody can own a legend, except for they try to control everything Lizzie Borden, and they've actually tried to act like they own the copyright to anything Lizzie Borden. So when you work there, you have to sign. I've seen some of the employment agreements. You have to sign things that say that any of your experiences there you can never talk about again. And if you do talk about them, you have to give a portion of any money you receive to the company. They try to reach out to anybody that is making money off of the Lizzie Borden name and basically try to cease and desist them into thinking that they actually own the rights to it. So I went on the radio and talked about some of the bad reviews that were posted on Yelp and on Google and on Facebook. And I was told by people that work there that he was making employees listen to that to see if he could sue me for defamation. I mean, that's the level of what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with somebody who, wants to own it all and doesn't understand why that he's getting pushback from people that have been doing this for a long time and realize just what we're saying. Nobody can own the legend. Nobody can own the streets of Providence or any other city. But you can do it in a way where you can be respectful of one another and not get in the way of each other and still be able to, maybe your tour style is different than Courtney's tour style or Becky's or whatever. But if you are willing to share those stories, then you can share that audience as well.
Yeah. I have it on some level of authority that particular company attempted to buy what's known as the Conjuring House.
Mhm.
And the Heinzens weren't interested in a company. They were interested in private ownership. And I give them total credit for that, and they had the right person. You know, and I'm certainly not going to speak for anybody, but that was something where they had an idea in mind as to who they wanted to purchase the house and how things were run there because they lived there. It was essentially their home, and they looked at it like a home. And it was one of the best decisions that was never made, if you follow me, you know. So to Courtney and Becky, into the idea of presentation, and Joyce made an excellent point. Even when we do a public ghost, we bring people into a place, and typically we do to benefit that location. Um, I have understood over the years by learning that there has to be a modicum of entertainment. I'm not talking about lying, I'm not talking about making up stories, but you have to be engaging with people. We had an event this past Friday at the Conjuring House. Tim was there, and I loved Tim being there because he's done so many of these things. So you understand if it's a slow night, chairs aren't flipping over, and things aren't happening, you still have to be engaging with everyone, even if you're just telling stories, you know, funny stories or whatever. And it turned out great. So what I'd like to do, Courtney, and Becky, Courtney first, when you bring on staff and someone says, gee, this sounds great, you know, I'd like to get involved in this. How do you go about your interview process? How do you go? What is your criteria and your expectations of the people that are coming on your payroll that you are going to hire to do these type of things? You know, Courtney first. Hey, Cody, what are you looking for in an employee as a tour guide?
You have to have good public speaking. So I've had teachers who have been tour guides. You know, they have that ability to present information. Because it is an endurance thing too. Like, you're talking for an hour and a half during Halloween, you might give back-to-back tours. That's 3 hours of being on stage, essentially. So I've had teachers, I've had a lot of actors, you know, people who have theater backgrounds because they're able to sustain that level of performance.
Yeah, you have a theater background.
Yeah, I have a BFA from URI. Like I you know, trained to be an actress. So that's a piece of it for sure. They have to tell me a ghost story during their audition, and it's got to be good. I don't care if it's, you know, I prefer it when it's personal experience. That definitely gives, you know, I give higher marks for that. But I'm looking for the cadence. I'm looking for how they formulate it and how they make me care about it. Why do I care about this story? Because you're not just going to care about a story for any old reason. You've got to sculpt it so that the characters matter, the people matter, and what's going on matters. Ghost tours typically don't have a lot of ghosty activity. I can't put them on payroll. You know what I mean? So like, you're not going to see like a spirit fly across and like a chair whip across a room or something. Probably. You might, but that's a real special night, you know? They're generally pretty low-key, chill ghosts. They're also, in Providence, they're buttoned up old Providencers. So, you know, they probably lived a very constricted life. So I think they act similarly as ghosts. So I look for people who have the ability to sculpt a story. They seem curious. They seem genuinely interested in the material. I've had hopeful skeptics. So they're like, I haven't experienced anything, so I don't feel like I can 100% say I'm a firm believer, but I'm hopeful. You know, okay, that's fine. I can take someone with an open mind. I'm totally good with that. I'm not looking for somebody who's going to embellish the stories. That's something that I have to cycle back with my guides and check in with them and make sure, like, nope, that's not the story, friend. Let's get back to the actual material. I have a script. They need to be able to learn it. Most people who audition for me do not become guides. And most of the people who I start training do not become guides. They do not make it to the finish line because they can't tell a story in a way that captures anybody's imagination. They can't get the facts right. It's a hard job. It's not an easy thing to do. So there are a lot of different aspects that you're looking for, but you're looking for personality. You're looking for somebody that is genuinely interested. When I get somebody who's like, oh my gosh, I was doing my own research and I looked for more things, that's when I see that spark. And I'm like, you're here because you genuinely care, not because you think this will be like a cool job to tell your friends about, which it is a cool job to tell your friends about. But, so it's all that balance.
Mhm. And Becky, a little bit different with you because you run a paranormal team. You are a paranormal investigator
Yes.
who is running these tours. So maybe your criteria is a little bit different. Maybe, I'm not sure if you've ever, I'm sure you do public ghost hunts and things like that. Usually on a tour, you have some, even if it's a writing tour, you take, 15 minutes to stop at a certain location. So being an investigator, do you separate the two, or I'm sure you agree with a lot of the things Courtney said as far as what you're looking for in a person, but being an investigator, is that a little bit different dynamic? Or, and my second part of this long ass question that I'm asking is, how important is it for people to be able to think on their feet, to know
Oh,
the subject matter enough? If a guest goes off script, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, but there's only so many times you can say, gee, I don't know, without your credibility taking a little bit of a dive.
right. Exactly. And I do completely agree with Courtney. You definitely need someone that, can follow the script. You need someone that can perform, so to say, that's outgoing, engaging. You definitely want those things. My script is actually so long and I have so much extra material in there that I don't think the guides would ever run out of stories or things to say. But I encourage them to, like, because one of my main focuses is a business called Lockpo out here, and I encourage them to do the ghost hunt with me so they can get their own personal experiences. Um, so that's very important to me. Right now, in all honesty, I don't have anyone that's working for me. I basically do it all myself. I kind of prefer that, to be honest with you. I'm not really running my ghost tours like I was, and in fact, they're kind of up in the air right now on how I'm gonna continue to run them. Uh, but one of the things that I was very picky on is they also had to have that one-on-one. They have to take time to talk to each individual guest because I wanted each individual guest to feel like they were included on the tour. So I told them, when you're walking in between locations and you don't have anything to say, go talk to one of the tour guests, connect with them. That connection to me was very important. That was something that I definitely wanted my guests to feel was like that little personal connection.
Yeah, and it's important. And Chris, being an author, and Tim being a radio show host, all about engaging with your audience. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing. You get into the weeds sometimes, or you get into the minutia when you're doing this. But Tim, you've done stage shows, and you know that pacing has a lot to do with what's going on. Accuracy counts. There's nothing wrong with a great ghost story, but the pacing, the engagement, telling the truth, and sometimes blowing things out of the water. We see that with a place like the Conjuring House, and other places where there's been a feature film done, and it's like almost a constant. I don't want to say battle, but you see people are very surprised sometimes when you say there was no witch who killed infants with knitting needles here. And there's almost a palpable, almost disappointment on them because I'm not sure what you think was going to happen here, but it's probably not that. So I want, and Tim, you can go, or Chris, I want you to talk a little bit about that aspect of it, being able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And still, it's like, listen, there are no demons here, but this is an active place, and this is a great story, and it bears telling you that.
For me, it's actually a hallmark of what I try to do. I've tried to develop my entire brand, and this is in my writing, this is in the tours that I do, it's in the talks that I do, where I balance history and folklore, because the folklore aspect of it isn't always based on fact. The folklore aspect doesn't have to have an absolute, truth to it, because it's about the stories that we tell one another and the way these stories grow and the way they evolve. And that's important. It is a valuable part of the way we as human beings relate information to one another. So I don't suppress the folklore, but I've learned qualifying it. Qualifying it is very important. You need to tell the folklore and let people know that this is what's been believed, this is what's been said, not necessarily what actually happened. And there's a way to present that information with people where you're completely honest, where you differentiate between the fact that Mercy Brown, the vampire of Exeter, is a great example. We know the date that she died. We know the date that she was, exhumed. We know all of these wonderful facts about her, and those facts are hard and they don't change. But people also say that when they lifted the lid of the coffin, that she had twisted in the coffin and that there was blood streaming from her lips. That's not true. 100% that it's not true, but it's part of the folklore, and you can share it as part of the folk tale that's risen up around her. So there is a way to balance those two things. Actually, Sarah, Yusuf, you had asked earlier about the balancing, the sort of the education and the entertainment. And to me, that's a big part of that. It's finding a way to give people the fun, the silliness, the spookiness that comes from the horror movies, which is a lot of what draws people in, but not to sell it in a way that doesn't have the integrity of a real, scholar. You need to share the folklore, let them know that it's a folk tale, and that folk tales are often inspired by real events, but aren't necessarily 100% true. And a quick note before I turn it over to Tim, one of the most important things to me whenever I tried to train people to do a ghost tour, and Becky, just like you, I didn't end up having a lot of people working for me because not many people could do it, could sell it. But one of the most important things I learned is that walking backwards is a really important part of learning to do a ghost tour. Yeah, I see you guys are both smiling, because you've got to be able to walk to places and still engage the guests. So half the time, being able to walk blind and walk backwards while you're still talking to guests is the most valuable skill, second only to telling a good story.
Yeah, and have enough room to hit Denny's afterwards.
Hopefully.
Tim, 4 of the most important words on giving a tour or a ghost hunter telling a story are "it's been said that."
Yes, qualifying is super important.
Yeah, I like to bring up the term legend quite a bit, because I talk a lot about the legend versus fact. But one of the things, you mentioned the stage show, Ken, and one of the things in the early days, I do the stage show with Jeff Belanger, Andrew Lake, Carl Johnson, and of course the photos of Frank Grace. But as we started rehearsing the very first time we were going to do this and writing these stories, we realized very quickly that we had so many years behind us as lecturers, as people telling the true stories and telling about the legends themselves in a straightforward basis, that we kind of didn't know how to tell a story, that we only knew how to tell the truth. And so for us, not that a story isn't the truth, but we had to learn how to add some dramatic flair to what we were telling, how to, use our voice as a way to inflect certain things in certain places. And it was a struggle for us at first. So for the people that can come out and do that can have all of those facts, and what to me looks like something very dry and matter of fact on the page, make it come to life. I think that's a skill that very few people have, and it's something that you really have to work hard at. But the thing I've always found is that people that are listening, they want both sides of that. So like Chris was saying, definitely differentiate between the two, but never shy away from one or the other. If you're telling a story about a legend, say the redheaded hitchhiker of Route 44, which as far as we know is a completely made up story, it's okay to say at the end of it that, there might be some modicum of truth in it. Or it's okay to take a true story and say, but there's also some legends that have developed as a result of it, because in a way that gives the story even more life, because not every story out there is worthy of having that, that legend experience wrapped around it. So to me, it just makes it more intriguing to share, and it's why we care about it. It's because there are these layers to it. So I think as long as you can present it in that way where people know the difference between the two, you're doing the right thing. And if you have to talk about movies that are made about the place too at the same time, just be willing to say, okay, we don't have any proof of that. We don't have any proof of that, but it still was a pretty cool scene, because you don't want to really upset people who were there because they love the movie.
The Route 44 Hitchhiker is a great example, though, of what I talk about when I talk about qualifying a story. Because if you're talking about a story that doesn't appear to have any historical basis, it doesn't mean that you can't tell it. What you have to say is, listen, people have been sharing this story for many, many years. To the best of our knowledge, we've never been able to find the truth behind it. So I don't know if there's any truth to it, but here's what people say they've experienced. And then you get to share the story. You've been honest about it. You're telling people that you cannot verify the story, but if the story is fun, again, it's absolutely still worth telling, and then you're doing it responsibly. And I think that's a very valid way to do it.
If you say it's been said that a woman appears in the second floor window to the left, everybody in that tour is going to look at the second floor window to the left. I mean, maybe you've never seen it, but it's been said that, and you create that vibe. George, you are back. You want to do a couple of questions here we have from...
Yeah, I want to get back with Becky and Courtney. I'll have Becky answer this first. Also, is that when these groups come in, and you said they've tried and failed where you're located right now, but I live 30 minutes from one of the most successful locations for paranormal tours and events, and that is St. Augustine, Florida. And talk about a group that does it right, but they are a mogul. There's no question about it. I mean, these guys run foot tours, trolley tours, walking tours. They have the actors, because Flagler College is right there, so they have the students there that are taking acting classes, and I guess they get credit for working with these organizations. But when you are working a small group, such as you are in Tucson, Becky, it's just yourself majority of the time. And I did one, I think, Ken, we were at Mystic, and we did the walking tour at Mystic, one of my trips up there. I don't know if you were with us. I think it was Andrea, myself.
Probably John.
Yeah. Andrea Perrin, whom I wrote a book with, and yet I've still not been to the Conjuring House. In any event, Becky, somebody like this comes in and they're doing trolley tours. Does that conflict with you? Because I'll be honest with you, Americans are lazy to get on a tour. Let's sit down and take this trip rather than the walking, because I know that Mystic tour was a long hour-and-a-half walk. However, there's an intimacy still to what you do on a walking tour that can't be given at 25, 30 miles an hour. So your thoughts on that kind of an invasion, so long as that invasion is not invasive to what it is that you're doing as a walking tour, or what do you think it would still affect you as far as, getting those groups to sign up for you instead of them?
To be quite honest, here in Tucson, it would definitely affect me because of the fact that we have the intense summers that are horrible.
Yes.
So yeah, people are going to definitely want to jump on something that's, air conditioned and, they can sit and not have to walk and sweat. So something like that would definitely affect me. It would definitely have a huge impact on me. It would probably take away pretty much all of my business if they did the exact same thing. Now, if they were doing something different, maybe not so much, but who knows?
Well, it's like a complete opposite side of the coin for what you do and that hot time frame, and what happens with Courtney and that freezing cold winter time frame. But it's still the same aspect of, the weather. The inclement weather will affect what you do for your tours. But same thing for you, Courtney. Would that type of a tour affect what it is that you do if it's a riding tour?
So there are like bus tours you can take of Providence, not a haunted bus tour, but there are bus tours. That hasn't impacted my business at all. But if they were to branch out and say we are 100% a haunted tour, I'm sure it would. The hill, so Providence, if you're not from Providence, Providence is built so Down City is fairly flat, and then College Hill, which is the section that I walk through, is a hill. The name doesn't lie, my friends. And so if people could choose to not have to hike the hill, they probably would choose to not have to hike the hill. What we do have going for us is that our streets are narrow and twisty and would be difficult on a bus. So thank you for our narrow, twisty streets.
And really bad architecture. So it brings a negative in what it is that you're doing, unless now U.S. Ghost Adventures, you can already tell where their mindset is at, and again, spreading lies and saying things about your organization. I wonder as to whether or not, with the right organization coming in, working in conjunction with you guys, where the price might be $12 and yours might be $12, but now we're going to charge 30. And when we get to the top of this hill, then Providence Ghost Tour is going to take over for us and give you guys a tour in this area, a walking tour, and then you get back on the bus and we'll go to the next location. That's a meeting of the minds, and that's the way that the field cohesively should be working together, not adversarially. And unfortunately, this particular organization seems like all they want to do is wipe out the competition. That's a shame of the matter. It really is. That's all I had there, Ken.
All right, just a couple of quick questions. First, from our friend Aaron, do you think going back to the balloons? Hang on.
Go ahead.
Do you think the balloons were a distraction by the government to divert us from paying attention to something else? I don't think so.
No.
And then Aaron makes a comment, can they cannot come in and help support the local existing businesses? That is beyond me. We're going to get to that. Sarah had a question. I think we pretty much answered, how do you balance education and entertainment? And real quick, last question. Would the tourists go on the tour if it was just a historical tour without the ghost stories?
I think people do that every day. So, I mean, I think that's pretty successful for the most part in a lot of these towns.
Gettysburg's a perfect example.
Yeah, sure.
I think that if we lean into the spooky stuff on these stories, it creates a different demographic, but I lean a lot into history in what I do. I mean, I try to tell, I think the best ghost stories are 98% history with that fun little bit of boo at the end. Because because the ghost story is often unproven, it's often apocryphal, but it makes it's the flavor. And for a kid, I was a terrible student and despised history, because when I learned history in school as a kid, it was a procession of dates and numbers and names that didn't much mean anything. And it was the first time I actually started to become interested in history was when I began to study ghost stories and realized how important history was to it. So I think that if you're saying, could a ghost tour that leaned into history be successful, I think absolutely. I don't do paranormal investigation during my tours because I feel like it distracts from what I'm doing. So I don't do we don't do a ghost hunt at all. It's all just about getting people to experience the history. And so I think that, at least for me, I would say that, yeah, that's a very saleable model.
We just got this in, and I think this is pertinent. How do the owners of these properties feel about added tours and companies? Because we all know, if we're standing in front of a property, it's historical property, but someone has private ownership, we have to stay on the sidewalk. We can, and of course, they have to also get used to the idea that there's a group of people standing in front of their house while a story is being told. And sometimes, if it's a revolving door of groups every half an hour, as opposed to every 2 hours, and someone's there, I think that would be something that you have to be mindful of as well.
You definitely have to be mindful of that. So for Providence Ghost Tour, which, Chris, I really appreciate you nailing down the importance of the history piece, because it's inextricable from a ghost story, or it should be at any rate. And it's very important to be able to tell the story, again, so that people care, right? If you don't know who these people are, why do you care that they're haunting a place? If you don't understand the context in which they lived, why do you care, and how can you understand their story? But with regard to being respectful of properties, most of my tours stop outside of a university-owned property. So Providence's East Side, Rhode Island School of Design, and Brown University own a lot of that property. But we've got students that are here, there, and everywhere, and there are private homes. And so it's trying to angle your group so that they can see the building, but we're not intrusive upon the people who live there. I remember we had a dormitory that was on the tour way back in the beginning, so probably at least 15 years ago. And the students were getting really uncomfortable. They were scared of the story that we were telling, like, hey, you just moved into a haunted dorm. And one of the RAs came out and was like, the kids are uncomfortable. We took the stop off the tour. There were enough other stops that we could do that. And it was also going to form like a bad relationship. A huge part of being a ghost tour is having that connection to your community and being a good citizen of that community. Because if you are not going to do well. They are not going to like you, and that will be known.
Well, you have an investment in it. And we never really got a chance, before I ask you my final, we never really got a chance to start getting into paranormal conferences. And the things like when a place is on television, suddenly business goes up there. They embrace the paranormal. Paranormal enthusiasts come in. They want to spend the night. They want to investigate. They want to do ghost hunts. That's another aspect of this that, we didn't get into. For me, as someone who ran a charity event, who at one time was the only game in town, the Ocean State Paracon, I can identify with this because there are large conferences now that get all the celebrities because they pay for make travel arrangements, hotel arrangements, appearance fees. Everything we make goes to charity. It's not a commercial endeavor, but we've reached a point now where we have become saturated with paranormal conferences, which are great, like-minded people getting together. But along the way, I stopped getting the phone calls that said, hey, Ken, we know you do Ocean State Paracon. When are you having it this year? We don't want a conflict with you. We want to give everybody space. I find myself now having to check the schedule to find out where I can fit it in, that people don't have to make a choice with their money. Well, do I go to this one, or do I, if I'm a vendor, can I get a table for this and a table for that? So I feel you in that regard. And because we're giving the money away to advocacy programs. So I know what it's like to, have to kind of deal with it. I can't stop you from having a conference, but we're not cooperating here. You're freezing us out, and, I'm sorry, but we were here first.
Yeah.
Like a desensitization to that type of thing.
Normally at the end of the show, we ask our guests, to give all the information, but maybe this will do it instead. And that is for Providence Ghost Tours, and this one is for Tucson.
I think a lot of people just haven't had the experiences. And so since they haven't had experiences, they don't want to believe in something that they don't know anything about.
We ran out of time. We got
1 minute, and rather than what's coming up next, Courtney, Becky, what can people do to make sure of your sustainability? Is it what can they do? Give you good reviews, just show up at your tours, all of the above. How can we protect you?
I would say definitely all the above. Go up for, look when you're booking a tour, look into it, make sure, it's locally owned and operated. When you do the tour, give that good review, because a lot of people do go to, TripAdvisor and things like that to look and see, how good a tour is. So definitely do things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys both for joining us tonight, as well as Tim Weisberg and Christopher Rondina. Guys, don't hang up on the show, but we are going to hang up on our viewers right now because Bill's got to move on to his next show. But on behalf of Ken DeCosta, my name is George Lopez. Thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button, the bell, and the thumbs up. We'll see you next week. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
Night.